quase sem espaço de armazenamento. Se você ficar sem espaço, não poderá salvar arquivos no Drive, fazer backup no Google Fotos, nem usar o Gmail. O homem morre e é trazido de volta por intervenção divina, EQM. Também a vida após a morte existe. Inglês, I never believed in anything beyond this world. To me, life was just a series of random events, no destiny, no divine purpose, just survival, day after day. I used to scoff at people who talked about angels, miracles, or heaven. It sounded like wishful thinking. I was a man of facts, logic, and control. At least, that's what I thought. The day everything changed started out like any other. I was rushing through my routine, buried in emails and deadlines, completely unaware that my soul was about to be ripped from this world. It happened so fast. And yet, I remember every detail. I had been feeling a strange pressure in my chest for a few days. I brushed it off as stress. But on that morning, as I stood in front of the mirror, buttoning my shirt, I felt it, like a fist squeezing my heart. My knees buckled. I collapsed onto the cold tile floor. Darkness swallowed everything. But that wasn't the end, it was the beginning. The next thing I remember wasn't pain or panic or even confusion. It was silence. A silence so absolute it felt alive. I opened my eyes, expecting to see the ceiling of my bathroom, but what I saw was impossible. I was floating, detached from my body, looking down at myself, lying motionless on the ground. There was no fear, no panic, only a strange, surreal awareness. I tried to speak, but there was no voice. I tried to move, but I had no body. Then, out of nowhere, a brilliant light appeared, not harsh or blinding, gentle, warm, pulling me in.
I was drawn. Memories that wrapped around me like a blanket as I moved closer. Memories flashed before me, snapshots of my life, my childhood love, my mother's voice.
It wasn't Earth, yet it felt familiar. The colors were more vivid, the air alive with energy. I wasn't alone. Figures stood before me, glowing, not with fire, but with a purity I had never known. They had no faces, but I recognized them somehow. One of them stepped forward. Without words, he spoke to me, not through sound, but directly into my being. He called me by name, and that's when I knew I was dead. But what came next shattered everything I thought I knew. This being, this presence, didn't judge me. It didn't shame me. Instead, it showed me the truth of how I had lived, the opportunities I had ignored, the love I had withheld, the pain I had caused, sometimes without even realizing it. I was made to feel it all, not from my perspective, but from the perspective of those I had affected. Every harsh word, every betrayal, every moment of selfishness, it echoed through me like thunder. I wanted to turn away, to deny it, but there was nowhere to hide. And yet, I was not condemned. I was shown mercy. I felt a hand, not physical, but powerful, rest on what I can only describe as my soul. And in that instant, a flood of light poured through me. It was love. Pure, infinite love. And with it came a voice, gentle but firm. It's not your time. Confusion, sorrow, relief. All of it hit me at once. I didn't want to leave. I didn't want to return to the pain, the stress, the chaos of life. But I had no choice. Before I could protest, the light grew brighter. My consciousness was being pulled, like a thread, back into my body. Then, agony. My lungs burned. My chest screamed. I heard shouting, machines beeping, and someone yelling, "We got him back." I was in a hospital room, cold, trembling, alive. And I knew. I had been brought back for a reason. But the world I returned to was not the same, because I was not the same. The beeping of the heart monitor was steady now, but my thoughts weren't. I laid there, stunned, staring at the ceiling, replaying everything I had just seen, everything I had just felt. Doctors and nurses buzzed around me, but their voices were muffled, distant, like I was still halfway between here and wherever that place was. No one in that hospital room knew what had really happened. They talked about ventricular fibrillation, how my heart had stopped for over 4 minutes, how I was technically dead. But I knew the truth. I hadn't just flatlined, I had left. Over the next few days, as I recovered, something inside me wouldn't let go. The memory was too vivid, too real to be a hallucination. I had experienced something far beyond what medical textbooks could explain, but try telling that to people. My wife cried when she saw me open my eyes. My brother called it a miracle, but when I mentioned the light, the place, the presence, when I said I knew I had crossed over, they looked at me with that same polite but uneasy expression people wear when they think you've lost your mind. I stopped talking about it, out loud anyway, but inside it was all I could think about. The voice, the light. It's not your time. What did that mean? Why me? Why was I sent back? At first, I thought I was supposed to radically change my life, sell everything, go on a pilgrimage, devote myself to charity. But every time I tried to make a grand gesture, something felt off, like I was trying to force my purpose rather than discover it. So instead, I started paying attention, not to the noise of the world, but to the stillness within. And that's when things began to shift. The first time it happened, I was standing in line at a coffee shop. An older woman in front of me was fumbling through her purse, clearly flustered. She dropped a few coins and apologized over and over. The old me would have sighed or checked my phone impatiently. But this time, I gently picked up the coins and smiled at her. No words, just a smile. She looked at me with tears in her eyes and said, "You don't know how much I needed kindness today." And in that moment, something clicked. The purpose I had been searching for wasn't in some grand epic mission. It was in the everyday chances to love, to forgive, to lift someone up when no one else is looking. But it wasn't always peaceful, because with the light came shadows. About 2 months after I was discharged, the nightmares began. Not the usual kind. These were vivid, almost hyper-real. I'd be in the same place I had gone during my near-death experience, only this time, something was different. The light wasn't there, the peace was gone. In its place was a heavy, choking darkness. Not evil, but empty, cold, hollow. I'd wake up gasping, drenched in sweat, heart racing, and then I'd feel it again, that presence, watching, waiting, not threatening, just present, as if I was still being observed. The next time it happened, I was wide awake, sitting on my couch, staring out the window, lost in thought. The world outside was quiet. Then suddenly, I heard it. Not with my ears, but deep within. A single sentence. "You must tell them." It wasn't a suggestion, it was a command. Not from a place of domination, but from a place of urgency. I didn't know who them was, or what I was supposed to say, but deep down I understood. This story, my story, wasn't meant to stay locked inside me. It was a key, a message, and the more I resisted it, the heavier it became. So I began to write. At first, just to get it out of my head. I poured every memory onto the page, every feeling, every image. But the more I wrote, the more I began to relive it, not in fear, but in clarity. The light, the being, the review of my life, the mercy, the love. I began to see threads in my past I'd never noticed before. People who had come into my life at just the right moment, painful events that had led to unexpected blessings, times I'd been protected, guided, without ever knowing it. This wasn't just a one-time event. This had been building for years. I thought I was the one in control of my life. But now I saw I had always been guided, and I was never alone. The moment I accepted that I had a responsibility to share what happened, everything around me seemed to shift, not dramatically, not in ways others would notice, but the energy of life itself began to respond to me differently. People I hadn't spoken to in years started reaching out. Strangers would approach me in the most random places, airports, parks, and even grocery stores, and share the most intimate details of their lives. They said they felt safe around me, that I had a calm presence. I didn't understand it at first, but eventually I did. It wasn't me they were responding to. It was what I carried back from the other side. It's hard to put into words, but once you've been to that place, once you've touched that light, it marks you, and people sense it. They feel it in ways they can't explain. It's like your soul vibrates on a different frequency, and those who are hurting, they recognize that frequency. One night, I was walking home from a late shift. It had rained, and the streets glistened under the dim glow of the lamps. I was crossing a quiet intersection when I noticed a man standing by the edge of a bridge. He looked empty, hollow, like he wasn't fully here. Something inside me told me to stop. I walked over and stood a few feet away, silently. I didn't say anything, I just stood there. After a while, he glanced over and said, "You ever feel like everything you've ever done has led to nothing?" I nodded. Not because I had the same story, but because I understood the feeling. Then I said something I didn't plan, something that seemed to come from somewhere beyond me. "You're not forgotten. And this moment right here isn't the end, it's the turning point." He stared at me for a long time. Then, without another word, he stepped away from the edge. We sat on that sidewalk until the sun came up. We didn't exchange names, but I knew why I was there that night, and that's when I began to understand the deeper truth behind what happened to me. Dying wasn't the real miracle. Coming back was, because coming back meant I had work to do. Not in the sense of a job or career, but a deeper kind of work, the work of light. And that work isn't glamorous. It's not about platforms or attention. It's about presence, about seeing people, really seeing them. But that path wasn't easy. The more I opened myself to this calling, the more I became aware of the invisible battles around us. Not everything I felt was light. There were moments, many of them, when I sensed pain, heaviness, even darkness in others that they didn't speak out loud. I began to dream again. But this time, they weren't nightmares. They were visions. I saw faces I didn't know, places I had never visited. I would wake up with names on my tongue, feelings in my chest, urgency, sorrow, hope. And in these visions, I saw something else, a gathering, not of people, but of souls, all standing together, watching the world, waiting. They were the ones who had crossed over and returned, like me, and they carried the same message. Tell them. One morning, I woke up at 3:33 a.m. I had never paid attention to numbers before, but something about that time kept showing up in my life. On receipts, on license plates, clocks, always the same. Later, I learned that many who have had near-death experiences see repeating numbers, signs, nudges. Some call it coincidence. I no longer believe in coincidence. I began speaking to small groups, churches, community centers, even living rooms filled with folding chairs and curious faces. At first, I was terrified. What if they laughed? What if they didn't believe me? But every time I finished, someone would pull me aside, tears in their eyes, and say, "That happened to me too. I just never told anyone." That's when I realized so many of us are walking around with hidden experiences, moments of connection, whispers from the other side, proof that we are more than flesh and bone, and we're terrified to talk about it. But the world is starving for truth, for meaning, for light. And if I had to die to realize that, then so be it. Because this is what I came back for. It's strange, isn't it? How a single moment, just a few seconds of silence between heartbeats, can shift the course of an entire life. Before my experience, I used to think life was a line, moving forward, always towards some distant goal. But I've come to understand it differently. Life is layers, threads, loops, and every soul we meet, every word we speak, every act of kindness or cruelty weaves itself into a greater tapestry we can't fully see from here. But on the other side, I saw it, there. I understood how everything connects, how even our greatest mistakes can be transformed, how pain can become purpose, how forgiveness, real forgiveness, can echo beyond this world. And that truth began to change the way I lived, not just the big things, but the smallest ones. I began calling people I hadn't spoken to in years, people I had hurt, people who had hurt me. I didn't wait for the right time or some perfect moment. I just picked up the phone and spoke from the heart. Some conversations ended in silence, some in tears, some in unexpected healing, but every single one mattered. One night, I visited my father's grave. We had parted ways years before. Too many unspoken words, too many closed doors. I never got to say goodbye. So I stood there, in the stillness, with nothing but the wind and my heartbeat. And I spoke to him, not as a son seeking approval, but as a soul reaching out to another. I told him about my death, my return, the light, the mercy, and how I finally understood how broken he had been, how hard he had tried, even in all his failures, how much I loved him. The moment I said those words out loud, a warmth filled the air around me. Not physical, something deeper, a presence, a peace, and I knew he heard me. Forgiveness doesn't require the other person to be alive, because souls are never truly gone, they're simply elsewhere. And once I accepted that, I started living with my eyes wide open. I'd walk through a crowded street and sense things about people, not facts or thoughts, just energy, emotion. A man sitting alone in a cafe with a smile on his face, but grief in his chest. A woman laughing too loudly at dinner, her hands trembling beneath the table. A child looking up at the sky with the wonder I'd once forgotten. I didn't approach them. I didn't interfere. I just prayed, silently. From the soul, I asked that the same light which touched me would reach them too. That's the thing about the other side. Once you've felt its love, you realize how desperately this world needs it, and you stop seeing people as problems or obstacles. You start seeing them as souls in transit, some searching, some lost, all worthy of compassion. One day I was speaking at a small event, sharing my experience. I looked into the crowd and saw a young man sitting in the back, head down, arms crossed, clearly skeptical. I spoke anyway. Afterward, he came up to me, said nothing, just stared. Then, with tears in his eyes, he whispered, "I was going to end my life tonight, but what you said, I think maybe there's still hope." He walked away before I could say anything. I never saw him again. But I think about him often, because maybe that was the reason I came back, or maybe it was one of many reasons. I don't pretend to have all the answers. I don't walk around in constant bliss or enlightenment. I have bad days. I get frustrated. I forget the light sometimes. But then, I remember that place, that voice, that mercy, and the promise I made when I crossed back over, to tell what I saw, to love without conditions, to live like every breath is borrowed. Because it is. We're all here on borrowed time. And the question isn't how much time we have, it's what we do with it. It's been years since that day, since the moment my heart stopped and the silence of death wrapped around me like a veil. Years since I stood in the presence of something so vast, so sacred, that human words fail to even scratch the surface. But it's still with me. Every day, I carry it like a quiet fire burning behind my ribs. It doesn't shout. It doesn't demand. It simply is. A knowing, a remembrance, a gentle pull towards something greater than myself. People ask me all the time, what did it feel like? And the only way I can describe it is this. Imagine being completely seen. Every part of you, every failure, every regret, every lie you told, every kindness you gave, every moment you thought you were alone. Imagine it all being laid bare, not to punish you, but to heal you, to show you that even in your deepest darkness, you were never unloved. That's what it felt like. And that feeling changes you. It changes how you walk through this world, how you speak, how you listen. You stop needing to be right all the time. You stop clinging to things that don't matter. You start craving simplicity, authenticity, presence. You start realizing that the divine isn't somewhere far away. It's here. In the way the sun filters through the trees, in the silence between two heartbeats, in the eyes of a stranger who smiles at you for no reason, You begin to see the sacred in the ordinary, and maybe that's the real miracle, that I died. And now I live differently, not louder, not busier, just deeper. There's one more thing I need to share. It came to me in a dream not long ago. I was back in that place of light, standing before the being who met me when I first crossed over, and this time he didn't show me my past. He showed me us, all of us, humanity, billions of souls flickering like stars across the universe, and then he spoke one final sentence. Remind them who they are, not what they are, not what they do, but who they are. We've forgotten. We've forgotten that we are souls first, not bodies, that we are here not to accumulate, but to awaken, not to conquer, but to connect, not to prove, but to remember. And remembering starts with one simple truth. You are loved. You always have been, even in your worst moment, even when you can't feel it, even when you don't believe it. I know, because I felt it, I saw it, and I came back to tell you. This isn't just a story about death. It's a story about life, a story about what it means to truly live, to live with purpose, with presence, with love. I don't know when my time will come again, but I'm not afraid, because I've been there. And I know, when the final moment comes, we are not swallowed by darkness. We are embraced by light, story based on real events,